she's so fearful and she's so afraid all the time. And I think, my God, I can't imagine living like that. I can't imagine living like the world is going to end any minute, and that, you know, everything is all going to implode, and there's, you know, reptilian aliens that are, you know, Satan, and everybody's hanging out eating babies. Like, I can't imagine living like thinking that that's real, because that would be awful.
This is the Q Dropped podcast. Stories of relationships torn apart by QAnon. Just a quick note to remind you that you can get an ad-free version of this episode and all future episodes on our Patreon, as well as bonus clips from this episode and all of our other episodes. The link is in the show notes. My parents were big on adventure. They took us on whirlwind tours of Southeast Asia and the South Pacific. We lived in Australia, and we explored New Zealand in a camper van, stopping each night to sit around campfires with locals and sleep until the adventure began again the next day. Even before we ever left the continent, my folks would take us to California almost every year. I can't count how many times I've been to Disneyland, or how many campsites I've slept in, or how many beaches I've drifted off to slumber on. I have been up and down the I-5 so many times I can't count. It sounds like we were a wealthy family, but we weren't. We were always lower middle class. My mom was a public school teacher, and my dad was a social worker. We didn't have a ton of money. What my brother and I did have, though, were a couple of parents who valued experiences so much more than they did material things. And so they spent their money on adventures. Adventures I will never forget. Adventures I will cherish forever. So when my guest today told me what life was like for her when she was a kid, I found the similarities uncanny. The hippie mom, the money struggles, the parents who hid the fact that money was tight and made everything fun, the yearly trips to Disneyland, and finally, the descent down the QAnon rabbit hole. Aside from a few small details, Sarah's story could be my own. Sarah is a mom of 2 daughters. She's a wife and a businesswoman, and when I sat down to talk with her, I felt her warmth right away. She's bubbly and funny and the sort of person you could just chat the day away with about anything. Something that, after hearing her describe her childhood, she clearly got from her mom.
My mom and I were really close, and she was always kind of like the different mom. Like, all my friends' moms were, you know, wearing, you know, dresses and suits to work. And my mom was a bartender, you know? And we were just kind of, I guess, a different family from the get-go. But it was always really fun. My parents had a lot of friends. They always had people over. And my mother was very social. And it was kind of like, we lived in a community where the vast majority of residents there were very conservative and very religious, and we were not. And so we kind of stuck out. I had a pretty great childhood. You know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I was a fairly, what I call a feral child. Like, we were kind of like, you know, latchkey kids and on our own a lot, riding our bikes to 7-Eleven, that kind of thing. It was great. My parents divorced when I was 8, and my mother remarried pretty quickly after that. And we moved from a big city area to a more rural community. And so I kind of went from like living in the city, like I say, to like just kind of living in the desert.
Her mom and stepdad would soon give her something she'd always wanted.
My mom and my stepdad had a baby, and I was super stoked to finally have a sibling. I felt like there was a lot of love there. And, you know, my parents, my mother and my stepfather, were very open, kind people.
Together, the family would embark on adventures, the memories of which Sarah would cherish forever.
We did a lot of camping. We were always going to, the lake. We went to Disneyland almost every year. She would save her tips from bartending like a whole year and then be like, look at the jar, we're going to Disneyland. And it would be great, and we would always come to California and go to the beach and go to Disneyland. And she was just like, in retrospect, I realized how poor we actually were. I had no idea how poor we were because she was so good at saving and making things amazing and, thrift shopping and buying our clothes and then sewing them all to look new and fashionable, and just incredible creativity from her all the time. And just, again, this sort of fearless attitude.
This fearlessness was a theme that would pop up again and again throughout Sarah's childhood.
My mom was never afraid of anything as far as I was concerned growing up. She seemed like a fearless warrior of a person. And she was very quick to point out things that were not fair. And she was the first person to say, hey, you know what? We shouldn't have prayer at school functions. This is bull. Like, nobody else would have said that. And at the time, I think it embarrassed me a little bit, but I was also kind of proud of her at the same time because, again, she wasn't going to let anybody dictate anything. And one of the big things that she always taught us was that kindness was the most important thing, just to be kind. Even if you don't understand what somebody's going through, you have to be kind to them. And so my brother and I were brought up with sort of these ideals that, racism was wrong and we had to use whatever privilege we had to right wrongs if we had opportunity to do so. And, women should have equal rights and equal pay and all, equality across the board. And liberty was very important.
Sarah's mother was a social butterfly who oozed kindness and love.
I think people always were interested in my mom. My mom's a very beautiful woman. She's very tall. She has long blonde hair. She's always had a slender figure, and she's always been very striking. And I think that coupled with this big, exuberant personality always made people very interested in her. And she was the kind of person who would make friends with everybody. If she was like shopping at a local store, say it was a Walmart or a grocery store, she would know every single person that worked there and every single person that worked in the back. And she would bake, Christmas baking. People do Christmas baking and they take, baskets to their friends. She would take that to 300 people that worked at the Walmart distribution center. Like, that's who my mom was.
When Sarah was a child, she says her mother was always ready to have a great time.
She didn't go to college. She didn't graduate from high school. She, held on to these sort of hippie ideals all the way through, she always had a lot of people around, and they were always drinking a lot. They were always, again, they were party people, nothing bad ever really happened, but it was definitely a different environment than anybody else had. She's an incredible artist and she's an amazing painter and she can do incredible crafts and put things together and she can cook and she can entertain and people love her and she's the life of the party. And she is very, very smart.
Sarah decided that she wanted an education and thrived in school.
When I was 17, I graduated from high school and went to college when I was a little bit younger than most people. And then I started dating my husband when I was 18, my now husband. And we dated for a couple of years and we got married when we were 20. And so like my life progressed kind of on this different path than I think my mother would have chosen.
After that, Sarah and her husband decided they wanted to start fresh somewhere else. So they packed up their lives and moved to a very large city in a different state. Despite the distance between them, Sarah stayed in close contact with her mom and soon would notice some strange behavior.
And around that time is when my mom really started to kind of get into what I would say more, I guess I would qualify it as a fringe beliefs. The internet was finally starting to come up. And they were using it for things. And one of the first things that happened was my mom started selling magnets as part of a multi-level marketing company. And magnets were going to solve everything. You lay on a you have these magnets and you put them on every malady and you lay on a magnetized, mattress. We put magnets in the water and we're all drinking magnet water. And, and it wasn't just like a little bit. It was like it took over. It was suddenly everybody should be doing magnets and magnets are all the time. And that was kind of the first time I was like, wow, this is weird. This is a new thing, but again, we were close. We were happy. I didn't really think much of it.
By this time, Sarah was starting a new life in another city. She'd just had her first child and she didn't really have the time or energy to put much more thought into it. She would watch from afar as her mom began to change.
As she started to age and just, I don't know, she got more closed off and she didn't, work anymore because she was getting older. And she started to kind of go down this path where things that would seemingly be easy to debunk or easy to research and go, hey, I don't think this is correct, started to become more and more frequent. And it started with, books like The Seed of the Soul or The Celestine Prophecy or The Secret. It wasn't enough to just read these books. It was like you have to totally absorb this book and it becomes your whole persona for the time that you're into that book. And that book is scripture in that moment. And then the next book comes along and it's like, oh my God, now it's this thing. It was constantly changing to whatever the new thing was. And it seemed as though the more she searched, the less happy she was.
Sarah's mom soon adopted a new spiritual practice she called sungazing.
And I was like, what's sungazing? And she said, oh, it's when you stare at the sun and you absorb universal life force energy. And I was like, Mom, that's not possible. You're going to ruin your eyes. And she kept staring at the sun and she ruined her eyes, and she had to have several surgeries to fix the damage done by the sun. And this was, years ago still.
This is a real thing. There are people out there who have convinced themselves that staring straight into the sun provides health and spiritual benefits. It is believed that staring at the sun enables people to connect directly to the sun's energy, kicking the body into high gear, especially the processes that produce melatonin, vitamin D, and serotonin. Some also believe that it can improve your concentration. All of the articles I found touting the health benefits of this practice cited scientific studies that seemed, at first glance, to prove that this actually worked. But when you take the slightest look closer, you'll see the problem. Studies that have found that exposure to sunlight improve melatonin, vitamin D, and serotonin levels are all real and do exist. The data is there. But that doesn't mean you have to look straight at the sun. There is no evidence to suggest that staring at the sun directly increases the health benefits that you get from just being in an outdoor setting. The study that suggests that this practice can improve concentration is actually a study on the benefits of meditation, not sun gazing. Woo pushers will tell you that because sun gazing is a form of meditation, it provides these benefits as well. But again, you can get the same effect from meditation without destroying your eyes. What these people won't tell you is that looking directly at the sun can and often does cause severe eye damage, including solar retinopathy and cataracts. But of course, the Qs saw their savior do it in August of 2017, the infamous day of the solar eclipse when Donald J. Clown looked up at the sun without any sort of eye protection. So of course, it's okay. But it's not okay. Sarah's mom learned that the hard way, even after having to undergo several surgeries to correct what she'd done to her eyes. She was still able to believe the lies spouted by the Q community. For Sarah, it was starting to look almost religious.
My husband had been raised, in a really staunch, very conservative, very religious family, really lovely, lovely people. But he had been raised, in a really, really Mormon household. And having grown up and left that faith, he was like, hey, I'm good. And I don't want any, I don't need to substitute any religion. I had my bulk and my fair share of that growing up. I'm good without it, kind of thing. And so as I kind of watched my mom and my stepdad go down these different paths, a lot of what they were doing seemed like religion, but it wasn't. It wasn't your standard, Mormon church, Christian church, Catholic church. It was a different kind of religion.
As her mother's beliefs became increasingly weirder, Sarah tried to keep an open mind.
She's like, UFOs are real. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense that UFOs are real. Of course, we're not the only inhabited planet in the solar system. Of course, UFOs are real. And then, but then it's like, okay, well, David Wilcock has all these books. Let's read all these David Wilcock books. And then Corey Goode is a truth teller, and he came out and he's talking about, I work for the secret space program, and the reptilians rule the universe, and Hollywood is full of pedophile Satanists. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, what is this? What are you talking about?
Both David Wilcock and Corey Goode are conspiracy theorists who grew their audiences on YouTube peddling COVID-19 misinformation and imaginative theories about aliens assisting QAnon that have no basis in fact. The truly scary part is that both of them are still pushing their bullshit on YouTube. Neither of them have been banned. Don't get me wrong. I love a good alien tale, and my favorite genre of books, movies, and TV shows are all sci-fi. I don't think it's possible that in this vast universe, we are the only life, and so I accept that there is likely some form of it out there, somewhere. What I struggle to believe is that some distant civilization has spent thousands of years developing an intelligent and organized society that can create the tech to fly to other solar systems, planets, and maybe even galaxies, and that these beings have toiled away at equations and theories and prototypes, inching ever closer to their goal as generations pass. And when they finally do it, when they finally create the propulsion system that's going to take them to new frontiers, and they find themselves on our pale blue dot, they just fucking lurk in the bushes and whisper with colonels? Right. It's one thing to believe aliens exist. It's another to believe they've been to our planet to play hide and seek. It's on a different plane altogether to believe that aliens are assisting QAnon, running secret space programs, and inhabiting the bodies of middle-aged white women in Arkansas. These ideas are simply too much for Sarah to handle.
And it just started to get stranger and stranger. And then it wasn't funny anymore. And it wasn't, not that it was funny at the beginning, but I was able to kind of brush a lot of it off and be like, oh, mom's into that now. Because my mom was always, into crystals and peace and love, and it all kind of seemed part of that persona. But then it got to, UFO truther things, and then flat earth things, and then the moon isn't a moon, it's really, an alien base, and the Fourth Reich exists, and just really, really crazy stuff. And I didn't really know how to quantify that with real life.
Through all of this, Sarah grasped at different ways to connect with her mom.
I went to a convention with her once in 2017. We went to a Contact in the Desert.
Contact in the Desert is a convention near Palm Springs, California that has been nicknamed the Woodstock of UFO conferences. This is a place where people gather to hear speakers, according to their website, who are focused on, quote, what's next in the fields of UFOlogy, forbidden archaeology, government disclosure, alien phenomenon, crop circles, and more. Sarah saw this conference as an opportunity to connect with her mom.
And again, I went because I was like, yeah, it makes sense that UFOs are real, and let's go to this UFO thing. And I learned very quickly that it wasn't just that. It was very much like, here's a little bit of UFO stuff, but now it's all this other stuff, like the aforementioned things about, reptilians and pedophile Satanists and Fourth Reich and all of that. And I was like, whoa, this is not my scene. I don't know if I can do this, but I wanted to continue to connect with my mom and do things with her.
Sadly, her stepdad was diagnosed with cancer shortly after the Contact in the Desert event.
I was pretty quickly, coming to the idea that I didn't want to go back to another one, but we had a good time while we were there. And it was the two of us, we had a good time. And it was right after that my stepdad got his cancer diagnosis. And she had said something to me after that. She said, well, so-and-so said that they were using directed energy weapons to people that went to contact in the desert. Maybe that's why dad got cancer. Maybe somebody used a directed energy weapon on the house and that's what gave him cancer. And I was like, Mom, no, it was a whole lifetime of drinking and smoking and sedentary lifestyle and maybe genetics. Like, nobody can point a weapon. And why? Also, why would somebody do that to you? Like, oh, let's pretend that this technology exists and people are actually using it. Okay, fine. Why would they target you? No offense, you're nobody. I'm nobody. We're nobodies. Why would we, like like why would anybody care?
Soon, Sarah found she couldn't avoid these topics when she spoke to her mom.
It wasn't just, how's your day? How was work? How's the weather? It's always like, can you believe this? And oh my gosh, that. And did you see that video I sent you? And it just honestly is rather exhausting, because I would just like to have just a regular conversation. And so it's hard to find that balance as we're aging. I'm not young anymore. I'm in my 40s. My mom's in her 70s. And I get that people get to change their beliefs. They get to change their politics. We all change as we age. And I want to empower her to do that. It's hard when it seems like a lot of it is so fear-based and just honestly based in a bunch of bull that I can't even figure out, where logically it fits into real life,
Sarah believes that Facebook made things worse.
As we've progressed in time, it went from a couple of books and then the internet with Facebook. Like once she got on Facebook, it was all downhill from there. And again, this was long before QAnon. It was just so easy to, I think, find people that think like you and look like you and echo in your echo chamber, your beliefs. And so then it becomes almost spiritual. It really is like religion. It's a different, I can't explain it. There were so many times when I said, God, I wish Mom would just find Jesus because I would know what I was dealing with if that was the case. And then with QAnon and Trump, things just snowballed drastically. And it wasn't just my mother sending me videos every now and then. It was posting constantly and texting me and messaging me and all of these things. And at first I would kind of placate her, and she would say, did you watch that video? And I go, yeah, I watched it, when I really hadn't. But that would then encourage her to send me more. So then I stopped lying and saying that I had watched the videos, but I was still receptive to receiving them because, again, I wanted to keep open communication. We don't, like I say, we don't live near each other. We don't get to see each other very often. But any little bit of acknowledgement that I gave, or even if I thumbs up anything, it was just further fuel for that. My brother and I kind of went on a rampage a little bit after Trump was elected, where she would post things and we would try to debunk them. I would email her things. I would look things up online. I would comment on her page, and she would just lose her mind at anybody, saying anything that she believed wasn't factual. Because, all of mainstream media is apparently, a lie, and anything that's provable is a lie, and Snopes doesn't know what they're talking about, and anything that's provable or is not provable apparently. And so then it just became a he said, she said situation.
When Sarah's stepfather had cancer, she hoped her mother might finally break free from the conspiratorial thinking.
When he got cancer, I thought, well, this might be it. This might be the thing that maybe breaks us free from this, because at first they were, meditating in the pyramid and using the Reiki energy and drinking the Reiki water and doing all these holistic, esoteric things to cure his cancer, which didn't cure his cancer. And then he passed away, unfortunately, in 2020, right before COVID happened. And I thought, well, again, if we were doing all these things and they didn't work, maybe that will be the thing that kind of shows her like, hey, maybe, this isn't all it's cracked up to be, but it had the absolute opposite effect.
Sadly, her mother bought into a lot of woo when her stepfather was sick.
When somebody is diagnosed with a terminal illness, and I'm sure this is the same with any terminal illness, not just cancer, everybody comes out of the woodwork with everything that cures it, right? Oh, this worked for my sister's cousin's husband. This worked for so-and-so. This worked for the lady down the street. And so they bombard you with this stuff. And people mean well. I get it. They mean well. Cancer's a bitch. You can do everything and you can do nothing. And some people live and some people die. And there's really no rhyme or reason to it. And I really do believe that, because it's just like all bets are off with that kind of a thing. But my mother, it was very easy for her to, for lack of a better word, just kind of believe this snake oil salesman mentality. Like these people were touting all of these things and all these powders and resins and, tinctures and oils and, energy. She was paying a good amount of money at some point for people just to send energy to the house. And I was like, well, how do you know they're sending it? What kind of, what do you mean? Like, are they like electricity? No, like spiritual energy. Oh, okay. Huh. So you're paying all this money and there's, okay. Interesting. I don't think you should pay for that anymore, Mom. Because I think that you're being taken for a ride, and that's a worry too. But I'm like, it's your money, but wow, that's a good grift right there. Like, pay me all this money and I'll send energy. Promise I'm sending it. Like, there's no way to measure it or quantify it, but I promise it's coming,
Things only seemed to get worse after Sarah's stepfather died.
She loved Disneyland growing up. Disneyland was her favorite. And she had gone to Disneyland when she was a child in the 50s when the park first opened. I want to say the first year that the Disney park was open in California. And she had her tickets. Like, I guess back then you had a book of tickets and you would rip the tickets off to go into different parts of the park. Very different than now. And she had one of her tickets from one of the books, like framed. When she married my stepdad, I was about 9 years old, and they were going to go on their honeymoon. And again, didn't have a ton of money. So they're like, let's go to Disneyland. And so then I got to bring a friend. So my mom and my stepdad were in a room, and then my friend and I were in the next room, and it was their honeymoon. And we went to Disneyland, and she had a Disney Christmas tree, and it was always Disney everything. But then unfortunately, as she's gone down this rabbit hole, I guess, Disney's bad, and Disney himself was, has his head in a chamber underneath the park somewhere, and it's the Disney park itself is all sex trafficking, so she gave up Disneyland. She gave up Disneyland for this belief system. It's like, it feels like a complete 180 of personality, and there's so much anger wrapped up in it. It's one thing, my father, whom she divorced, my biological father, who I'm also still very close with, he's always been conservative. He's always been a Republican. He's always been a Catholic. I know right where I stand with him. I know right what his beliefs are. I get it. And he's always been that way. But with this QAnon stuff, he's like, that's batty. Are you kidding me? Who are these nut jobs? Like, he's like, but he's, a business owner. He's an educated man, and he's doing his own thing. And I felt like even at these UFO conferences, a lot of the people there were white, cisgender boomers. They were all kind of that ilk. There were very few people of color. There were very few young people. There were very few anybody but this like one kind of sect of people. And again, that's who, she surrounds herself with. Wish my mom would go to therapy, honestly. After her husband died, I was like, please talk to the social worker. Please, please, please. It's like, there's support groups. There's all kinds of, and nope, she didn't want anything to do with therapy, anything to do with the medical establishment, because, doctors don't know anything. Therapists don't know anything. All they want to do is give you drugs. Like, none of it's, nobody knows anything unless it's like this Reiki yoga practitioner that's anti-vax over here on this video on YouTube. They know everything. But, my sister, who's a surgeon, knows nothing.
Then, of course, COVID happened, which just added fuel to the fire.
We got a memo saying, don't come to the hospital. Like, literally, they were telling people, do not come to the hospital unless you are in active cardiac arrest or you have a gunshot wound, because we will not see you. So then it was like, oh my God, don't break your leg. Don't need a stitch. Don't hurt your, we were trying to take the kids out every day to go hiking and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, don't do anything. Don't touch anything. If you sprain your ankle, we're on our own, and that was really scary, because I was like, if we hurt ourselves or something traumatic happens, we're screwed, and people didn't understand that. And the reality of literally having everything shut down and have no production and no work for that much time, and having my neighbors die and my friends' dads die and my daughter's teacher's dad die. Like all of these people that we knew, not necessarily, our family, thankfully, knock on wood, but we knew a lot of people that were dying and having to be confronted with. First it was, what was it? It was, I think, it's just the flu. Then it's like, it's been manufactured and engineered, and then everything's full of nanobots. And then it's, well, it's been exaggerated. And every time you take a COVID test, when they put the thing up your nostril, it's putting a chip in there. And then the vaccine is bad. And, and it was just like, no matter what we did, it was arguable. The second we were able to get vaccinated, we all got vaccinated.
Sarah's husband's job required the vaccines and made masks mandatory on the job site. Everyone had to be tested frequently, so the family wore masks long after everyone else stopped.
So I would share photos of us doing something or going somewhere, and we would maybe be wearing masks, or we'd be doing something, and I would get a comment or just a side remark that was basically saying, that we're sheep, or that we're stupid, or that we're, and it was really frustrating, because it was a really scary time for us. And then when we got COVID, we were all vaccinated, so it wasn't terrible. She was like, hey, I've got some ivermectin. Do you want me to send it to you? And I was like, no, please don't. That's the hard part, is everything my mother does is from a loving place. It really, truly is, even though a lot of times it doesn't seem like it.
Sarah's mom often makes end times predictions and seems to be genuinely scared each time the world is supposedly going to end.
When these things happen and then nothing pans out, I always am hopeful that maybe this is the time when they're going to see like, I got duped. But it's never that. It's never I got duped, I was wrong. It's, the white hats came and changed everything, or the secret space program saved the day, or there's always some amazing, miraculous reason why the world never ends. But then the next thing's going to happen.
Sarah is continually amazed at how easily her mom will move the goalposts.
Before the January 6th uprising here, my mother was posting on her Facebook, I wish I could go to the rally at the Capitol. If somebody wants to drive me, I'll go. Thank God she didn't go. She would have been one of those people that just marched right in thinking that, like, it's just great that we're here, This is totally fine. This is normal. And as it was happening, like literally on the day, January 6th, as these things were transpiring and it was on the news and it was everywhere, suddenly it was, that's not Trump supporters, that's Antifa. That's what all the posting was. It's Antifa. I'm like, wait a minute. You and all your friends were going to go. Those are all your boys. Like, what are you talking about? But now that they're in trouble, it's Antifa. Now that they're starting shit and like killing people, it's Antifa. No, those are your people that are there because your guy said to go there. And now you're backpedaling.
Like many other QAnon adherents, Sarah's mom had been duped into buying silver.
She's already invested, my God, so much money in silver. I keep telling her, please stop buying silver. Like, you don't, like, I know you want to have all this silver, but like, what are we for the end of the world or the Great Reset or the 10 Days of Darkness, or pick your favorite end of world times thing, because they've all been on the table apparently. I go, you're going to just use a silver bar to get some milk? Like what is your thought? What is your end game with all this silver?
It didn't take long before the mother who had raised her kids to value kindness and equality, and who would bake for 300 minimum wage workers at a Walmart distribution center, would begin to behave in ways Sarah struggled to stomach.
Never would she have, I think, been somebody to not stand up for Black Lives Matter and not be a part of that. But that's, the worst thing ever, apparently. We have a mutual acquaintance that has a trans son, and this son, she sent me a picture of them and was like, oh my God, can you believe this? Blah, 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 blah. Just a really mean, judgmental text out of nowhere at 6 o'clock in the morning one day. I just get this picture and this like really judgy paragraph. And I didn't really know how to respond because I was just floored. Because it was just for no reason other than to talk shit about somebody and be mean, somebody who clearly is going through something, and I just said, Mom, I don't even know how to respond to this. Like, it's really mean and not like you. And, you don't have to understand anything about trans people to be nice. You don't. And my friend, who is the parent of a trans child, is the one that told me that, because I had asked her, is it hard if you don't understand? And she's like, it's not my job to understand. It's my job to just love my kid. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was like a light bulb moment for me. And I was like, you don't have to understand any of this. You just have to love your kids and embrace them and be nice. And so me trying to say that to her, I wasn't trying to be mean. I was just trying to kind of call her out, I guess. And just because, again, my mom I can't imagine her just sending me a photo of anybody just to talk shit about them. Like, I can't fathom it. That's just not who she is. And she was just like unhinged the second that I said this, coming back at me with, all these things. Well, you said this and you said that, things I have no recollection of saying, mind you. And I was like, well, even if I did say some disparaging comment about trans people 5 years ago, which you're saying I said, but I really have no recollection of it. Even if I did say that, I'm an asshole and I'm wrong, and I can admit that now. And that has nothing to do with this rando text you're sending me. So that doesn't, even if I had said these things, which I don't recall, but even if I had, why does that lend itself to you then texting me this random photo and being mean about a trans child? Like, what does that do for any of us? And she got really upset and, somehow became my fault. And so now I just said, Mom, I don't know what to tell you. That was a mean text and just doesn't seem like the mom I know. And that was, I want to say, probably 2 weeks ago. I have two daughters. One of them is an adult now. She's 20, but my youngest is almost 11. And, what if she's a lesbian? I would say to my mom, wait, I don't know. Like, she's 10, she's figuring it out. But what if she is? What are you going to do then? What if she's trans? And I did text her this week just to tell her that I love her, just because she's my mom. So I just said, hey, I just want you to know I love you no matter what. And she texted me back and said, I love you too. And that's the last interaction we've had in a while.
Sarah grapples with the guilt this has caused.
Frankly, it actually feels kind of nice to not have interactions a lot. And that makes me feel terrible. It makes me feel sad. And then I look at my relationship with my daughters and I think, my God, I don't want this for us later. Like, whatever I have to do to make sure this never happens, I will do it. But I have to think my mom at 40 and me at 20, like, she would have been thinking the same thing. And the only thing that changed is this bizarro belief system that just snowballed after QAnon and Trump and all that. And it just became scripture, even though none of it makes sense. And the goalposts change constantly. And logically, it just does not add up. None of that matters. None of that matters. There's no logic.
Sarah has some ideas about why her mother was attracted to the QAnon worldview.
As she got older, she was searching for something. She was trying to fill a void that could never be filled. And I don't know where that comes from. She's not well educated at all. And so I know for her that makes her self-esteem shrink. And she feels not unworthy, but I feel as though she often would feel like educated people or wealthy people, like richer people or what have you, looked down on her. And I think for my mother personally, just the horrific loss of losing, her husband, whom she loved so dearly, is such a hard thing to deal with at any age, at any time. And I think that just made her, instead of dealing with that hurt, it's much easier to go look at all these other scary things and pour all your time and energy into believing in these other scary things. She's always sort of had a mistrust of the government that stems from her hippie days. it was always kind of like, the Vietnam War and all of that way back then, that peace and love hippie lifestyle really, embraced a mistrust of the government. And I think that she just kind of brought that ideal forward through her life. And as she went through life, as I said, she didn't finish high school. So she didn't go on to higher education and learn a lot of that discernment and logical thinking, I think, that comes with higher education. Not that there's anything wrong with people that don't go to college or that don't graduate from high school. I'm not saying that. I just think that it's, I think you have different skill sets or different ways of thinking. And that typically happens when you're in college because you're impressionable and you're trying different things out and you're learning about psychology and all of these, different things that maybe you didn't know about. And so with that background and then the gasoline to the flame is the internet. And I think older people on the internet lack a lot of discernment. And when these videos and these things come out and they're, produced in a certain way and they have all the good music cues and all the fast cuts and the editing, it's really easy to get suckered in. It's all about some holy war and we're fighting evil and we're trying to get a better timeline and you don't understand the big picture, but I do. Let me tell you, I'm enlightened because I believe all this bullshit, but you're not. And I think that's a big part of what this is. I think a lot of these people, a lot of these Qs love feeling like they're in on the secret. And then after Trump and QAnon, it just really blew up and just got bizarre. And it's just a sinister stew. It's just a sinister stew.
Sarah sees that her mom truly believes she's doing the right thing.
And I do think that she feels that everything she thinks and believes is for the greater good. 100%. I do think she really, really believes that. And I do think that she feels like someday we're all going to see, we're all going to see someday and it will all be revealed. And, we're all going to have to just come together and the light will win. It's all about the light versus the dark and Jesus versus Satan and all of that. And the light will be revealed and we'll all come together in love. And I do think she really wants that. But I also think at some level, she wants everything to come crashing down because in order for the light and the love and all that to happen, there still has to be the 10 days of darkness or the great reset or everything to crash down. And I think that a lot of these people really want that to happen. They want the chaos and the world war and the race war, the whatever war. They want that because it validates a lot of these beliefs and then they can rebuild from those ashes, and that's really scary to want that, to want the whole world to come crashing down so you can be right.
I struggle with the guilt of not wanting to be around my parents anymore. When they visit or when I see them, I can't wait for it to end. Understand these are people who I considered my heroes, my best friends. Now I struggle to spend 15 minutes with them because they just aren't the same people who raised me. Hatred is what drives them now, and I'm angry at them for this. They raised me to love all of my fellow human beings, and now they are driven by hatred. At Christmas, my dad mentioned that he liked Danielle Smith, the new premier of Alberta, which is the province next to us here in Canada. This woman is threatening universal health care and, at her swearing-in ceremony, stated that the unvaccinated were the most discriminated against people she'd ever witnessed in her lifetime. She had the nerve to say something like that to her constituents, openly and proudly negating the discrimination that the LGBTQ+ community faces on a daily basis, completely ignoring the horrific systemic discrimination faced by Canada's Indigenous population, and totally brushing off the discrimination faced by a multitude of minority groups in our country who cannot choose their sexuality, their disabilities, or their ethnicity. She is a hateful woman, an awful woman who is going to have a drastic effect on marginalized groups in Alberta. So what was it that my dad, Someone who spent his entire career fighting for these very same marginalized groups like about her. When I asked him, he said it's because she had said she hated Trudeau. And he admitted that that's all he knew about her. Right there is all the evidence you need that these two strangers who inhabit my parents' bodies are driven entirely by hate. So yeah, I don't like being around that. And I don't like to see them nearly as often as I used to, and that leads to guilt. It's so hard to deal with all of these conflicting feelings all of the time. I love them, they are my parents, but I don't like them anymore. And I don't enjoy their company. So I feel bad about that. And it just kind of lurks in my mind every single day. And then I wonder if I'm being too harsh. Should I try to spend more time with them? And then I do. And then they say something that reminds me it's not really them anymore. The people who raised me would never have ever even considered supporting a politician because she hates the right people. The people they have become do, though. So I feel gross and angry and frustrated, and honestly, I feel grief, and I just can't keep feeling these things. I have a life and kids and pets and a job, so I avoid seeing them or having any sort of in-depth conversation with them. And then I feel the guilt again, and around we go. Sarah describes feeling the exact same way I do. In fact, she might as well be speaking for me.
And so it's really become unfortunately, a relationship where now I have really distanced myself from my mother. I don't really talk to her much. I don't comment on anything she posts. I maybe see her once a year, maybe. And it's really sad because I love her very much. No matter what, I love her. She's my mother, and I'm grateful to her for my life and for all my memories and all these wonderful things. But just calling her on the phone fills me with anxiety and dread. And I have to really psych myself up mentally to call her just to say, how are you? And what are you doing? And then the thought of a visit is like, oh my God, I have to really prepare for that. And I don't want to go by myself. I want my family, I want my husband, my kids to come because I need a buffer, and please don't leave me alone. And that's awful. And it makes me feel terrible because then I just beat myself up for having such horrific feelings about my mother, and so then I just feel shameful that I'm not a more loving daughter, or I'm not a more understanding daughter, or I'm not a better daughter, for lack of a better word, because I know she loves me very much. I know she's lonely. I know she misses me. And it's still really hard for me to go and see her now. And that I never would have thought that. I never would have thought that. Even when back in the day when she was staring at the sun and getting into aliens, I never thought that would lead to this. And it just breaks my heart because I just don't even recognize this person anymore. And you never think you're going to say that about your own mom. I worry about my mom being lonely and alone, and yet I don't go visit her because it's too hard, and then it makes me feel awful for not visiting. So then I get all this empathy and I think, okay, I just have to love my mom enough, and I just have to listen to her crap because to her it's really real. And when people believe something, whether it's religion or this kind of stuff, like when people believe it, it's real to them. It's like when your toddler's 3 years old and they're crying over literally spilling their milk, to them it's really real. They're really upset over this thing, even though it's silly to be upset about it. To them, it's very upsetting. And so you coddle them and you love them and you tell them it's okay. And I keep thinking, if I do that enough with mom, she'll come around. I don't think she's coming around. I think this is it. So I have to figure out how to coexist with her and have maintain a relationship with her. Because I've had plenty of people go, no, you just need to cut her out of your life. Go no contact. It's not good for you. And I can't do that. I don't want to do that. I have no desire to cut my mother out of my life, but it is getting increasingly harder to be present in her life. And I don't know how to quantify that. And I don't know how to fix it. And I wish I did.
I can't express how truly challenging it is to have to deal with someone you love that's been replaced with a hateful and fearful and paranoid person who's waiting for the end of the world. The struggle is real for Sarah.
And it's not a punishment. I'm not trying to punish my mom at all. I love her so, so, so much, but it's really hard for me. It's just hard for my mental health. And it makes me a jerk. I take it because I can't speak to her about these things on a level playing field. I can't really vocalize my feelings, and I can't not argue, so then of course, then the people I take it out on are my husband and my kids, and I don't mean to, and I don't want to be that person. So then I think, okay, I just have to be level-headed. I just have to love everybody. It's just my job to just love everybody. How do I just exist and not feel shitty about all of it all the time, I don't know. It's really tough. I feel for anybody that's going through this, whether it's a parent, a spouse, a sibling, a friend, like watching someone change and become scared and angry, and also just believe in things that just seem so odd and out of left field. It's really difficult, And like I say, I wished for all these years that she could just find Jesus so I would know what I was dealing with.
Sarah wishes QAnon adherents could see the damage this is doing to the world.
These beliefs and voting this way actually affects real people. There's no humanity in it anymore. It's just about being right and about, again, this sort of echo chamber of people who mirror these beliefs and these strange, ideals. And I was trying to point out, Mom, if you look on like 4chan, which 8chan and all these chans, or you can go back, all this goes back to anti-Semitism. All the QAnon stuff just literally goes back to people hating Jews. That's what this is. And they also hate gay people, and they hate trans people, and they hate, hate, hate. There is not a love message here. If you go back far enough, you might think there is because you personally love people. But let me tell you, that's not how it is. And when you sit here and tell me you hosted a watch party for Candace Owens' bullcrap thing, anti-Black Lives Matter thing in your backyard, that hurts my heart because the woman that raised me never would have done that.
Sarah doesn't believe any of this is making her mother feel good.
I just want her to be happy. I guess that's the reality too, is I just wish she could be happy and balanced, whatever that means for her. Because I often think, well, I look at my in-laws who are very religious, but it brings them a lot of joy. Their religion brings them happiness, I feel like. They feel close to Jesus. They feel like they're doing good things for good people, And so it might not be for me, but it makes them really happy. So fine. Like I'm for it. It's their life. It's their decision. My mother, a lot of this stuff, I don't really think it makes her happy. I think it makes her scared, and I think it makes her distrustful of people, and I think it makes her kind of mean sometimes. She's so fearful and she's so afraid all the time. And I think, my God, I can't imagine living like that. I can't imagine living like the world is going to end any minute, and that, everything is all going to implode, and there's, reptilian aliens that are, Satan, and everybody's hanging out eating babies. Like, I can't imagine living like thinking that that's real, because that would be awful.
Like so many of us, Sarah is saddened by what QAnon says about our society as a whole.
And I don't think the people who put out this rhetoric give a shit about the lives that they ruin or the people that they hurt. They don't care at all. All of this shit that everybody's trying to pull, all of this does is just further divide people and give people the right to discriminate against Black people, against gay people, against trans people, against women and their reproductive rights. All these things are doing is just giving people more of a legal right to be assholes. That's really what it's coming down to. And just to enforce their religious beliefs, which again, seem to be pretty anti-Semitic, pretty anti-Black or people of color, and pretty anti-LGBTQ. So it just goes back to old-fashioned religious, conservative, like right-wing belief systems that have been around forever, but all y'all are buying into it and you don't even know it. You don't even know that that's the path you're going down.
Sarah is deeply worried about her mother.
I'm very fearful that somebody will take advantage of her, either financially or some other way, because I think a lot of these people are pretty easy to take advantage of in that way. I constantly worry about her happiness, because I just don't think that this is a happy headspace to be in, because she is definitely very worried about the state of the world and everybody around her, and, you know, the days of darkness coming and ending. And so I worry about that. And I just worry about her being alone. She's alone.
Her coping methods are creative.
I spend a lot of my time writing very long, heartfelt emails to my mother that I never send, where I'm just like, Mom, I miss you because of this and this and this. And you said this today and it really bothered me because of this. And I wish you were like this. And I'm mad at you, but I love you, and all of these things. And I never send them because it won't do any good. But for me, it's almost, I guess, therapeutic in a way to get it off my chest, but I could never send them because I know they would just hurt her feelings. And I'm not trying to do that. I feel like she already lives with enough sadness and a lot of these negative feelings. I don't want to add to that. It's sad, but it's helpful for me so that I don't get angry, because I don't want to get angry, because I can't do anything when I'm angry. But it's really sad. I get sad a lot. I've spent a lot of time crying about this, and a lot of time just wondering what I did wrong, because I did introduce my mom to Facebook, because I was on Facebook and I live in another state. So I was like, hey, you can go in here, you can share pictures, Worst decision I ever made. I wish I had never done that. I feel like she probably would have found her way to Facebook and such anyway, but I definitely was the one that introduced her to it, and I will never forgive myself for that, because I know that did, move things along for sure. I'm very busy with work. I have wonderful friends that keep me grounded, and I do love my family, and I do try to see them as much as I can. And as I mentioned, I'm starting therapy next week. So, and that's been a long time coming. So I'm excited to kind of have that. And I hope to learn even better coping skills. And I write a lot and I paint a lot, and, we do a lot of different things artistically. So hopefully I continue to have a lot of outlets. And I bought a Nordic Track stationary bike a couple of years ago, and I love that thing. So I write out a lot on there as well. So it's very helpful. But my poor husband, I would say, bears the brunt of it, and he's just the best.
Sarah finds it's helpful to remind herself that she has no control over what her mother thinks or does.
It's not my life, and I have to allow her to live her life the way that she chooses, because she's an adult and she has autonomy and free agency and all of those things. And I want to embrace those ideals, but it's really hard when she's staring at the damn sun.
I asked Sarah what she would like to see change in the world.
I want people to think for themselves and make solid decision based on logic and reason. And of course, feeling. We all have feelings. Like I'm not saying we remove our gut feelings from things. I'm just saying that anxiety isn't intuition. It's not, that's not discernment. Just because it resonates with you doesn't mean it's true.
For Sarah, moving forward means figuring out how to have a relationship with someone you love who you simply don't recognize anymore.
And it just makes me sad. I just miss the person she used to be. And I just love her so much that I really, really wish for that back. But I know that that's not going to happen. And so I just have to figure out, how to exist like this and be nice. But then what happens is, I swallow my feelings and I swallow what I'm going to say. I just swallow it. I'll swallow it. But then it comes out occasionally, like we'll get in a fight about something that doesn't matter. But then my reaction is bigger than it should be, because I'm dealing with all these other unspoken things that I'm not really saying, because I can't say them, because then we just fight about that, And so I'm constantly feeling like I'm just forcing all these feelings and thoughts and things down. That's why I write the emails that I never send. you always think that love is it, that love is all you need, love is enough. And it's not, because you can love somebody and not want to be around them, you know? I've been married a really, really long time, over 20 years. And I always tell people, I love my husband dearly, but love isn't what builds my marriage. My marriage is built on this idea that I keep meeting my husband over and over again at every iteration of his journey in life. And he keeps meeting me over and over again at every iteration of my journey of my life. We choose to keep building a life together. Love is great, but you have to choose to show up and be there for that person. It's not the love that builds the longevity. That's wonderful, but that's not all it is. And it's the same with building a relationship with your parents. You have to, or your siblings or whatever, you have to continually show up and re-meet them over and over again. But when you meet them and they're a freaking totally different person and their belief system is now totally polar opposite of yours, and they can't shut up about it, it's really hard to just exist and agree to disagree. You can love somebody without understanding them or without liking them, and sometimes that means loving them from afar, and that's okay. You know, I love my mother so, so, so much, and I don't wish to harm her in any way, and I don't wish to tell her how to live her life or how to think or how to be. All that being said, as I've mentioned, it's just very hard for me to be around her and be around these beliefs. So I have to really, really love her from really far away most of the time. And if that's how I have to get through it, then that's what I have to do. And yeah, I don't have to understand it or agree with it or even like it to love her. So just remember that, I guess.
I want to thank Sarah for joining us to talk about what it's been like to watch her mom go down the QAnon rabbit hole. I could relate to so much of what she said, and I really hope she finds a way to have a relationship with her mom. You can get an ad-free version of this episode and all other episodes on Patreon, as well as bonus clips from each interviewee. The link is in our show notes. Next week, we get to talk to a pair of brothers whose QAnon father actually ran for office in Colorado. Make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube to be notified when that goes live. Thanks for listening.